Hello everybody. First of all, thank you to Andrea for inviting me here. I'm very pleased to learn about everything you're doing, and I can see that there are many points of convergence between what you do and what I do. My name is Aboubakar Sanogo. I'm assistant professor in film studies at Carleton University in Ottawa. I was born in Burkina Faso in West Africa. It's also known as the home of African cinema. And I'm now in Canada as part of probably one of the fourth leg of my trip around the world in this journey of life. So I have three major trajectories that I'd like to talk about. My research, my curatorial background, and teaching. It's really more curatorial and research. In terms of curating, when I moved to North America in the 1990s, I did curatorial work in film, specifically in art and film, at the Smithsonian Institution for 2 years. I programmed African films where none had existed before. So I did a series called Great African Films of the 90s, which I'm happy to say got some really very interesting reviews, including the best calendar of events for the year 1999 for the Association of American Museums. So I did a number of other series on South African cinema, Malian cinema, etc. I've also done some curating at FESPACO, this film festival, which for those of you who don't know, I would like to tell you about. It's really the most important film festival that shows the work of African and Afro-diasporic filmmakers. And I'm pleased to let you know that as of next year, 2015, the official competition of FESPACO is open to any person of African descent on the planet. So not only African filmmakers can compete, but also very good. My research is really focused on a number of areas. I work first on African cinema, of course. I work on documentary, I teach documentary theory and history. I work on world cinema, on colonial cinema, and the relationship between film form, history, and film theory. My key question is really one, I hope it won't lead me to a dead end, so far it has not, is really, can be summarized into one. How could we revisit the history and theory of cinema by taking Africa as a point of departure? And so the project being to, in the process of this revisitation, to also contribute some concepts that might be useful in terms of accounting for the practice of African cinema, but also other practices. Since we adopt a lot of concepts from all over the place, I thought we should contribute also some concepts as well to the discussion. So, so I start one of the places I'll start would be, for example, going back into the history of cinema. For anybody who had taken a history course on cinema, we'll start with the Lumiere brothers, who everybody knows, The Wrath of the Train and all these films. But the Lumiere brothers did a total of 1,425 films, out of which 100 dealt with Africa. 100. And so it's a fantastic corpus, to put it mildly. Good. So it's a fantastic corpus that could be divided into a sort of the travelogue genre and one that really takes place in human zoos, what you do in the Anthropological Exhibition that most of you know about. They used to take place around the late 19th century, where Africans were brought from Africa. Having been defeated in the colonial battle, they were brought to Europe and displayed in zones behind fences and so on and so forth. This is one case. This is called baignade de nègres, so Negroes bathing. So they are in this film in 18. This is May 1896 at the Paris Zoo. So they brought a number of Africans who are bathing there, and so with the recreation of their living conditions in the background and so on. So one of the reasons why this is of interest to me is not really to rehash this question of human exhibit, but really to see what its implications could be for us in the study of the history of Senegalese wine. So that includes, of course, looking at the history of cinema beyond the narrative spectacle dialectic that divide the history of cinema in two. For those of it's a bit of a specialized discussion, but we talk about the cinema of attraction versus the cinema of narrative integration. If you look at this footage, you can argue that the cinema of attractions cannot solely account for this period of film history, and that the division, the abstract division that's made in terms of 1896, 1906, etc., cannot hold. Very quickly, so part of the work is also looking at some of the founders of discursivity in African cinema, and those include, so these are some of the footage, some of the film that the Lumières were taking. This is a number of Ghanaians who were being shown in Lyon in 1897 through their processions and so on. So women were washing their babies, and people were discussing whether or not these children reacted the same way as white children, etc., etc. Okay, so moving on. So looking at some of the founders of discursivity in African cinema, Ousmane Sembène, whom everybody knows, it's become very fashionable these days to discuss post-national, the post-national in African cinema, the post-national is in African cinema. What I'm trying to do is see if there's more than the national idea that could be used to account for the complex cinematic practice of people like Ousmane Sembène. I think among other ideas, I think we can look at sort of some aesthetic propositions like the agoraphilic, for example, in the cinema of Ousmane Sembène, where he resolved many of the narrative contradictions of his film in particular sets of scenes which he repeats from film to film. Moving on, I'm working now on a book on the cinema of Med Hondo, who's also one of the founders of discursivity on African cinema. Very quick, going back. Also very quick, recent interest in museography in the Musée du Quai Branly. Those of you in art history would know it. It's a highly problematic museum. So I decided to write something about it. The title of the piece is Museums Also Die. The Musée du Quai Branly, the mask of the contemporary, and all the issues that can be raised with this. Last thing, I found this at Carleton, something called the Carleton University World Cinema Forum. The idea is to study world cinema in an horizontal versus a vertical way, with a radical equality of gender different cinematic practices, and see whether we can say something here